Welcome to my first attempt at a brand overview. This one is going to be a long video. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel, today we're talking fragrances, and this is a new one. This is a house overview for Lorenzo Pazzaglia. I've been debating trying out this new format for quite a bit. On one hand, my low-level OCD has basically been dictating that in order to give a full proper house overview, I needed to own each fragrance from the house. I needed to at least have experienced each fragrance from the house. The reality is that a lot of houses have a ton of fragrances, and it's not really possible or feasible to have a full overview. So I sort of came to terms, I sort of summoned the courage, and I decided that for the house of Lorenzo Pazzaglia, my 7 fragrances and 2 well-worn samples were enough to give you a very good impression of the house, a very good overview of what Lorenzo Pazzaglia truly is and truly represents in fragrance. This video will sort of follow the cadence and rhythm of a speed dating video, except I'm going to be talking about full bottles and full wear experiences. I will still be spraying the fragrances on strips just to talk about the first impressions and first opening, but I'll also be throwing in a lot of information about the dry down and the overall wear experience for each fragrance. I also have 2 samples today. Again, they're 2 very worn in samples. I know them very well. I really didn't feature them in a first impression comparison video or anything like that just because they weren't new to me. I've had these samples for a while and I've been wearing them a lot, so it wasn't really fair to be faking a first impression, a first time reaction. Today, in total, we're gonna be covering a whopping 9 fragrances. We're gonna be covering Black Sea, Artik Sea, Dream Sea, Sex Sea, Py Rhum, Evil Angel, Cherry Ink, Bloody Smoke, and Sangria. A lot of fragrances, a lot to talk about. Let's get right into it. I don't usually commit to a single brand with such conviction. It's relatively rare for me to own multiple bottles of a single brand. There are obviously exceptions, my main culprit being Amouage. There's also other brands that I like collecting. One of them is Toskovat, the other one being Zoologist, and the third one being Meo Fushuni. These are all brands that really speak to me on an artistic level. I do see them as art pieces. I do see them as brands that really tell a story globally. I also thought that Lorenzo Pazzaglia was one of those brands, and that's why I ended up collecting up to 7 fragrances from the brand. I still do think that Lorenzo Pazzaglia is a really awesome brand, but I am a little bit lacking in terms of story, in terms of like global overarching significance. Lorenzo Pazzaglia is an Italian brand. It's a very fun, mass appealing Italian brand manned by mainly one guy, Lorenzo Pazzaglia himself. He has no real experience or formal training as a perfumer. He has a culinary background, and actually he works as a chef in the restaurant owned by his family. He's a very down-to-earth, relatable, honest, and humble individual. And when interviewed, he basically confesses that his love for perfumery sparked sort of out of nowhere. He started messing around with like Chinese oils, just putting things together to see how they would smell. Again, guided by his culinary intuition, culinary background. He then proceeded to start showcasing his creations in his restaurants. He would basically give his clients samples, expecting some sort of feedback. Apparently, the feedback was very good, and his perfumery business slowly but steadily took off. Lorenzo Pazzaglia is definitely one of those Italian perfumers that I would categorize as chaotic. He might even be the best representation of this Italian chaotic approach. And what I mean by that is that the Italian modern niche perfumery scene, especially when referring to people that are self-taught like Francesca Bianchi, like Lorenzo Pazzaglia, like Filippo Sorcinelli, to a degree to Alessandro Gualtieri, this scene is basically dominated by an injection of creativity, but this creativity is very impulsive and intuitive in nature, and it really shows in the creations of these artists. All of these perfumes are incredibly chaotic, they're messy, they're edgy, they're really intense. Most of them, if not all of them, are incredibly powerful, incredibly loud. They really showcase the passion that goes into these projects and into this art form as a whole. And as I said, Lorenzo Pazzaglia just might be the perfect representation for this category. He's so down to earth, so simple, so relatable. He's just a guy that likes perfumery, a guy that likes to smell good. And he decided to take this into his own hands, basically gifting us these bombastic, powerful, really edgy, really fun fragrances that I really love and I really want to talk to you about today. Before we start talking about the individual fragrances, given the fact that this is not a speed dating episode but a house overview, I wanted to quickly touch upon the presentation. All of the bottles look the same, they're presented in the same way, they all have the same sort of box, and I just wanted to talk about his style. The Lorenzo Pazzaglia products have a very unique, defined look. Nothing else on the fragrance market really looks like these things. They're all black lacquered bottles like this. They all come in 50 mLs. There's also another format which is 28 mLs. Very cute. I really like those. I have not seen them in person, so I can't really comment on that. All of the bottles feature this metal pebble looking cap. It's heavy, it's beautiful, it's polished, it just feels great in hand. It's incredibly reassuring. It slides onto the bottle, friction based, very beautifully weighted. Some of the caps, maybe the older ones, do not feature an owl engraving, but are actually more of a smooth pebble look, like in the case of my Artik Sea. I actually prefer this look. It's a little bit more minimal and more clean, but Lorenzo Pazzaglia is ultimately a fun, chaotic brand, and he really wants to embrace his brand identity and brand image, so I guess he started marking the caps. It's okay. Lorenzo Pazzaglia is just that. All of his stuff is a little bit messy, it's a little bit edgy. The overall presentation for Lorenzo Pazzaglia's bottles is good. The quality is pretty good. The retail price for Lorenzo Pazzaglia's products is actually really good. Really great value, especially considering that they're all incredibly potent extract de parfum. These 50 ml bottles retail for about maybe exactly 145 euros at the time of this recording. So I do feel that you really get what you pay for, especially considering how unique and how edgy, and again, how powerful these creations are. The one gripe that I have with Lorenzo Pazzaglia's presentation, and I already mentioned this in past reviews, is the general lack of brand identity. You could argue that his identity is this chaos and fun edginess, but when it comes to labeling, it's really inconsistent. For example, Black Sea is very minimal, very clean. I do feel that it suits the bottle design a lot. But then you move to something like Sangria and you get this obnoxiously colored, almost iridescent sort of label. There's like a drawing under it, there's like some fruit. It's just really off-putting, it's really different, it feels so cheap. Other stuff like Artik Sea goes back to a little bit more of a subtle design, and we have a gradient of colors that really perfectly suits the fragrance. But then again, you pick up something like Sex Sea and we go back to tackiness. And this is not even in a chronological order. He just kind of like jumps around with no brand identity, no idea of what a brand image is. I'm also of the opinion that the way he names his fragrances comes across as incredibly childish, not thought out, and just a little bit cringe. Yes, we have stuff like Sex Sea, which is a cute play on words, but then we have stuff like Evil Angel, which is just so lame. The whole fragrance brand, the whole fragrance range feels designed by a kid that doesn't really know what they want. So that's a little bit of a downside in my opinion. Overall, I'm nitpicking here because the fragrances are actually amazing. I really like the character of Lorenzo Pazzaglia, the way he presents himself in interviews. He's just, again, so relatable. He's just a guy, and that's the most beautiful part of it. He's just a guy that is in love with perfumery and he likes to make good smelling things. Okay, this huge intro has been long enough. Time to start talking about the individual scents. I'll be covering these fragrances as they come in no particular order. There's nothing really tying these together. Another thing that I'll be doing differently from the speed dating format is that I will not be assigning a score to these fragrances just because it's not a first impression video. And although I definitely have a preference to which I like the most, to which I consider the best from the brand, I'll be talking about that when that specific fragrance or fragrances land in my hand. All right, enough chatting. Let's start this massive endeavor with Black Sea. Black Sea is easily one of the more popular fragrances from the brand. It's basically seen as this beast mode marine scent, rivaling stuff like Mega Mare. It's that potent, it's that pronounced, and I can absolutely confirm that. It's a very deep, dark, obnoxious marine fragrance with a huge footprint. To my nose, the scent profile is not necessarily unique. It's incredibly recognizable, especially if you put your nose on other niche marine fragrances on the market. They're all characterized by this immense cologne smell, very fishy, very algae driven. This basically embodies that perfectly. It's not unique, as I said, but I do kind of recommend it just because it's so powerful. It's just so wow inducing. And if you're specifically coming from the designer market, if you smell something like this, you're gonna be completely blown away. I seem to recall that this is actually the first fragrance from the Sea collection, which turned out to be a very popular collection for Lorenzo Pazzaglia. The other fragrances in the line, in my opinion, are a lot more imaginative, a lot more interesting. This one here really represents what a baseline deep marine fragrance is all about. This comes across as basically a blend of everything else on the market. It smells a little bit like Acqua di Sale by Perfumery. It smells a little bit like Mega Mare. It's dominated by this immense myrtle note in the opening. By the way, let's give it a spray on strip and let's talk about what we get. I'm gonna be doing one spray only just because these are incredibly powerful. So when you first spray this, you get a very fresh, as I said, myrtle note. It's very herbaceous, very aromatic, but you immediately are also tackling this fishy cologne, this very, very salty, very heavy, very drony type of accord. Again, this is a heavy scent. It basically permeates the spaces. It has massive projection, massive sillage, massive longevity, but this is also kind of true for all other Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances, unless I specify, because there's a couple which are a little bit more weak. Yeah, this to me is the perfect baseline for a marine fragrance. Although I do not find it that interesting or unique anymore, I really do appreciate it. I have other fragrances in my collection which are actually previous to this. They came out before this that do this formula better. I both like Acqua di Sale and Mega Mare better than this, but they don't have the fun factor of the Lorenzo Pazzaglia. This is a very fun, very endearing, very overwhelming type of fragrance, and I really recommend it for that. If you like the idea of getting into marine fragrances and you're looking for that first heavy, fun, overwhelming experience, Lorenzo Pazzaglia's Black Sea is definitely a really good candidate. It's relatively simple, it doesn't really transition much or evolve. It's basically what it says on tin, and it's just a beautiful, deep, dark scent with some marine undertone. It's actually really fun, so I do recommend this. So if you want to dip your toes into the sea line of Lorenzo Pazzaglia, this is a really excellent choice. I actually want to intentionally mix it up and not necessarily covering all the sea fragrances at the same time. I just want to alternate just to keep it fun. The next fragrance that we're going to be talking about is Cherry Ink. This is actually one of my favorite cherry fragrances in my collection. It's the one that I like the cherry most out of. It's the type of cherry that I like. I like tart, artificial, very kind of chemical cherries, very, very bright and zingy. This is exactly that. It's a beautiful black cherry surrounded by this incredible, beautiful smoke note, a little bit of an ink note that perfectly matches the cherry, and it perfectly gives it a beautiful background. The issue that I have with Cherry Ink is mainly one: the fragrance longevity is pretty bad. And again, I said that most Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances are beast mode and they have excellent longevity. Unfortunately, this one is not one of those. On clothes, this fragrance lasts forever and permeates the clothes forever. But on skin, for whatever reason, maybe it's my skin chemistry, I get barely 3 to 4 hours of wear. What is Cherry Ink? Well, once again, it's a very simple name to a very simple fragrance or very simple concept of a fragrance. It's cherry and ink. Cherry and maybe like a light incense smoke. This is, again, it has that beautiful cherryness that I really, really seek in fragrances. This is absolutely not feminine at all. It's very, very unisex. Actually, all of the Lorenzo Pazzaglia offerings are incredibly unisex. They're like perfectly in the middle. They really strike the unisex factor perfectly. And this one here is very fruity, but it's not overwhelming. It's not like something like Sangria, which is designed to be completely different. It's designed to be a little bit overwhelming. This is delicate, it's smoky, it's airy, it's kind of mysterious. It's a little bit dark, but it's also wispy in a white smoke type of way. Every time I pick this up and I smell it, I'm there questioning why I don't wear this more. Let's give it one spray here. This is such a unique smell. It perfectly combines the cherry tartness, the cherry fruitiness with this wispy smoke. It's kind of mysterious in a way. It's not heavy. It's definitely not as heavy as other Lorenzo Pazzaglias that tend to sit in the base of the tone range. A lot of the Lorenzo Pazzaglias are actually really drony, really heavy, and just really fatiguing to wear to a degree. This is actually not like that. I love this scent. It's so unique. It's basically one of the better cherries out there in my opinion. Again, except for the longevity, this is really good. The interesting thing about this fragrance is that as it dries down, you start losing a lot of that cherry tartness, and it becomes this incredibly hard to describe scent, to the point where the last time I wore it, I sprayed a ton of it on, and it was all over my shirt. And I picked up the shirt like after a couple days and I couldn't remember what it was. And I kept smelling it and I was like, what is this? What is this? It's so weird, so difficult to describe. And then it dawned on me. I just thought, hey, it's Cherry Ink. What a beautiful fragrance. The ink note in here is not as exotic as it sounds. It's far from those dark inks from Beaufort London, Mel Fuscioni, those dark, melancholic, sad inks. This is, it has a little bit of a weird, not necessarily ink, but has this smoky factor to it. It has this density, it has this like sweet metallicness to it that is maybe transferring into ink. But I wouldn't necessarily describe it as cherry ink. I would more describe it as something like cherry smoke or cherry incense or something like that. I know it doesn't sound appealing. I don't necessarily find cherry ink appealing per se, but it's reminding me more of like a cherry shisha, like a cherry incense, like a very fruity cherry incense. And it's weird because the cherry in here doesn't make this scent gourmand whatsoever. This is far from being a gourmand. The cherry in here just gives it a little bit of a fruitiness, which really aids to this appeal. I wouldn't even know how to categorize this scent without the cherry. I wouldn't even know what to describe it as. Very, very unique. I like this a lot. I just wish that the longevity on skin would be a little bit better. But I'm not saying that this is not going to work on your skin. I'm just saying that this is a little bit weak on mine. If you're into the idea of cherry fragrances, if you like the idea of a different type of cherry that's not necessarily super fruity or overly gourmand or overly sweet, if you like the tartness of cherry, maybe combined with something like a very light incense smoke, this might be exactly a fragrance for you. I really recommend sampling this because at the very least, it's a very novel fragrance that smells pretty much like nothing else out there. Third fragrance that we're going to be talking about is Sex Sea. And if you know me, you pretty much know that this is my favorite from the line, at least from the Lorenzo Pazzaglias that I own. This one here perfectly combines freshness, fun factor, wearability. It's a mass appealing scent, which is also incredibly unique. It has a little bit of edginess, a little bit of funkiness with those marine notes. It's just a really well balanced, really well put together scent. And I rave about this in my full review. Let's give this a spray. I love it. I haven't worn this in a while just because I really associate summer to this scent. This is like the perfect ultimate summer scent, which is super long lasting, fresh, invigorating, a really great way to start the day. This was actually probably my most worn fragrance last summer. This is absolutely gorgeous and glorious. It perfectly combines fresh, invigorating citruses with these beautiful, dense florals and these underlying background marine notes that both lift the scent, but they also bring it down and give it body. This is absolutely beautiful. And the best way to describe this with simple words and simple images is walking along the coast where you can't really see the sea, but you hear it. You hear the waves clashing against the coast. You're walking within this sea-like vegetation that has a little bit of saltiness, a little bit of salty brininess, but overall it's so fresh, it's so citrusy. The flowers are blooming, the sky is blue, everything is like perfect, the temperature is not too hot. You get this very beautiful, gentle sea breeze. And again, this is like the most beautiful representation of the perfect vacation day. It's not tropical, there's no coconuts, there's no palm trees, there's nothing like that. It's not much about the relaxing, it's more about like going for like a hike or a trek in the coast and you hear the sea rumbling below you and you have this vegetation around you. It's absolutely gorgeous. I really like this. My God, this is like the perfect representation of this scent profile. I also tried other stuff which is sort of in the same family. I tried Pacific Rock Moss by Goldfield and Banks. I also tried Boyce 1920 Oltremare, which is sort of similar, but this one here is the only one that combines the beautiful freshness and energy of Goldfield and Banks and the longevity with the slight marine notes of Oltremare. It's just so incredibly well balanced. This is so incredibly well balanced and designed that I'm almost a little bit skeptical when thinking about Lorenzo Pazzaglia's process for this. It doesn't even smell like a Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrance. It's just that good, just that thought out. And Lorenzo Pazzaglia is usually a lot more messy, a lot more edgy. This is very, very well balanced. It just doesn't feel like his creation. And again, I'm not throwing shade on him, but this kind of feels like an accident. I don't know, maybe it's the best type of accident. It's really, really good. I highly, highly recommend Sex Sea if you're looking for a very fun, long-lasting, powerful, invigorating, yet mass appealing, yet unique scent profile for the summer. This is almost unbeatable. Shifting gears once again, now we are talking about Bloody Smoke. Bloody Smoke I've reviewed recently. It's a very interesting, very peculiar incense scent. It's a very incense forward scent with a slight culinary type of accord to a culinary type of vibe. This is another one of those fragrances that really doesn't appear to fit in Lorenzo Pazzaglia's portfolio of offerings. I've already covered this in my review of this, but he confessed that this is basically his least favorite fragrance and that he was kind of pressured into putting out an incense fragrance on the market despite not necessarily being a fan of the note. It has a little bit of a chaotic, messy vibe, a little bit of edginess, which I could tag to Lorenzo Pazzaglia. It's definitely powerful, it's definitely long-lasting, it has that beast mode, fun sort of attitude, but for whatever reason, I just don't feel a lot of passion in this. It comes across as really jarring, really, really different. I like this, by the way, but it just doesn't smell like Lorenzo Pazzaglia. It doesn't have that fruity blast to the face. It doesn't have that incredible punch. It has this very smoky, very city-like sort of smell. In my review, I described this as smelling like you're in an alleyway, you're kind of smelling the city smell, and something is coming out of a window. Maybe someone is cooking something like a curry, Asian cuisine with a lot of cumin, with a lot of spices. It's just really, really strange. It's not transportive per se, it just gives me this image. When I smelled it the first time, I was like, wow, this is really, really weird. This is actually kind of reminding me of Amouage Fate Man, if you've ever smelled that. This is a much milder, mass appealing version of that. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is mass appealing just because it's, again, so culinary, it's so incensey. But if you're a fan of incense and you like your incense with a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of edge, this could be exactly a fragrance for you. It's weird because Lorenzo Pazzaglia and incense, they don't really work together in my head. Lorenzo Pazzaglia is a very Italian person with very Italian roots. He comes across as one of those Italians which are kind of stubbornly Italian, kind of like my dad. My dad is like almost 70 years old, and still to this day, he will not eat sushi just because it's not Italian, it's not traditional. So I don't know, it doesn't really strike me as his fragrance, it doesn't really strike me as his style, although he kind of managed to pull it off in a way that is still fun, still edgy, still kind of unique. No other incense fragrance smells like this on the market, or rather, that I tried at least, and I'm a huge incense junkie. I do like this, I do wear this, it's very, very peculiar. I'm not always in the mood for the thing, but it's mass appealing enough to not raise any questions, to not come across as off-putting. There's nothing smelly about this, despite the name. By the way, the name is absolutely terrible. Lorenzo Pazzaglia does not make smelly fragrances. He's there to really promote smelling good, to make mass appealing, very fun, very likable scents overall. This is a little bit weird, but still very wearable, still very interesting. Just not my favorite. We are now going to talk about the fragrance with the worst name ever, Evil Angel 2809. As I said before, this is so childish, it's so lame, but the fragrance is actually quite good. Interestingly, Lorenzo Pazzaglia is very open about designing this fragrance in basically a week. He started designing this fragrance on the 21st of September, which is I think his birthday or the birthday of his partner, and he finished designing the fragrance on the 28th of September, aka 2809. Now, this fragrance comes across as actually relatively complex. It's the most transitioning fragrance from the Lorenzo Pazzaglia line because it starts out incredibly fruity. It starts out very, very citrusy, very energetically lime. Let's give it a spray. It has this beautiful mentholated lime aspect that is kind of reminiscent of a cocktail of some sorts, maybe like a mojito or something like that. It's very refreshed, very zingy, very energetic, but also very sweet and very fruity. This is definitely a mass appealing scent, which is really good for summer, maybe summer evenings, maybe clubbing. Really, really powerful. Actually, wow, this is really filling the space as I speak. It's very youthful, very approachable. Actually, all of the Lorenzo Pazzaglia fragrances are demographically incredibly appealing, incredibly likable, incredibly easy to get to know. Lorenzo Pazzaglia's fragrances are actually kind of lacking a little bit of elegance, which might not be too appealing to a little bit more of a mature audience. You really have to embrace his mood. You really have to embrace the chaos, the edginess to really enjoy these. They're very, very fun, quite youthful, quite energetic, just quite sweet, just over the top everything. And this one here really represents Lorenzo Pazzaglia perfectly, despite the awful name. So as I said, this opens up very fresh, very limey, very zesty, very energetic. But then, kind of out of nowhere, it just transitions to this incredibly boozy, very heavy, sweet, boozy vanilla type of scent. And it's really interesting. The transition is so sudden that you're suddenly like, wait, what is this on my skin? It's completely different from whatever I sprayed before. And this was obviously my first reaction just because I wasn't expecting that transition, but I was also caught off guard the second, third, and fourth time I wore it just because I really wasn't able to pinpoint the moment of massive transition where the scent goes from this very zesty lime to this incredibly deep vanilla boozy thing. Really, really interesting, really unique. If you're a fan of pseudo gourmand fragrances, if you're a fan of loud, fruity fragrances, which are very youthful in nature, this is super unique. It smells like nothing else out there. Has a little bit of a Sergio vibe in the sense that it's very powerful, very in your face, very wow inducing. From the first spray, you're immediately mesmerized if you're into that sort of thing. Me personally, although I do really respect the idea and execution of this, it's not really my thing. It's a little bit too sweet, too fruity, just too overpowering, just too overwhelming. But if you're into fruity fragrances that are really good in the summer, that really give you that energy, that really transition well to a very deep, droney, vanilla, boozy base, this one here might be actually your new favorite fragrance. It's really enticing. You have to definitely check it out. Get yourself a sample. This video is turning out to be incredibly fatiguing to film, but we have to move forward, we have to finish this. Next fragrance is Artik Sea. This one is also one of my favorite fragrances, also from the Sea line. Very popular actually, despite it being a little bit edgy. This one basically takes the DNA of Black Sea and it really freshens it up. This one is a more transportive fragrance from Lorenzo Pazzaglia, at least from the ones I own. This one here basically brings you to the Arctic Sea. You really picture these icebergs just floating around. Everything is just freezing cold. In a very interesting way, despite the uplifting freshness of this scent, this fragrance really works well in the winter, specifically in sub-zero temperatures. There's something about the mentholated top with those mineral notes and this incredibly strong metallic zing that perfectly combines with sub-zero air, which gives you this very photorealistic sensation of being in the Arctic. It kind of reminds me of this commercial, this ad when I was a kid about these like cough candies. And the guy, after chewing this candy, he would just breathe out this incredibly condensed cone of cold air that would kind of just freeze everything. Really interesting. It kind of reminds me of this. This is still super fun despite it being cold and despite it being quite abstract. It has the fun Lorenzo Pazzaglia vibe for sure. And it's one of the best parts of this fragrance because it's really wearable, it's really different, it's a different marine scent, it's way fresher than you would expect. Nothing else that I smelled in the marine realm smells exactly like this, and I have a lot of marine fragrances. It has a little bit of an aspect of something like Acqua di Sale, maybe it's the myrtle note that is very green and very fresh. The general Lorenzo Pazzaglia Sea line DNA is very apparent in this. It's not as fishy as Black Sea, but it definitely features the algae accord very prominently. This is green, it's fresh, it's metallic. It's really good. I like it a lot. It really transports me again to these icebergs, to this Greenland sort of landscape, maybe Antarctica. Maybe it's all marketing bias, maybe it's all a placebo effect, but let me tell you, wearing this fragrance in the winter has proven to really enhance the cold in the best possible way. It didn't make me cold, but it made the cold around me feel colder. It made me feel fresher. It made me feel more energetic in the best way possible. I really like this. This is again one of my favorites from Lorenzo Pazzaglia. It's probably my second favorite from the Sea line, and it's not redundant at all if you own Sex Sea. This could be a little bit redundant with Black Sea, but between the two I would choose this without hesitation. The only reason why I would recommend Black Sea over this is if you're incredibly resistant to green metallicness combined with marineness. If that's the case, maybe Artik Sea is not for you. This is a very green, very fresh fragrance. And again, it's very green. It comes across as mint. Like there's a strong mint absinthe component, which is impossible to ignore. If you're more into the deep sea aspect, go with Black Sea. My last full bottle to be showcased from the brand is actually also one of my favorites. This one here is Sangria. I'm shocked that I like this so much. On paper, I shouldn't be liking this because it's a very heavy, very sweet, fruity fragrance. But there's something about this which makes it so incredibly beautiful, so happy, so fun. It just really embraces my happy side. It just really makes me feel like a kid. And despite Sangria being an alcoholic beverage, this does not come across as boozy whatsoever to me. Let me just spray it on the strip here. This is basically candy. It's like a beautiful, zesty, zingy candy. It's sweet, very sweet at that, but it's not overpowering, it's not overbearing. It's beautifully balanced. It kind of reminds me of tropical candy, like tropical juice. It beautifully combines the colorful saturation of tropical fruits such as pineapple, mango, and papaya with the energetic zestiness of freshly squeezed citruses. It's sweet, it's very sweet, but it's balanced also. There's also some sort of a greenery in here. Maybe there's some mint, maybe there's some other thing that really cuts through this sweetness. It's also surprisingly realistic, especially for Lorenzo Pazzaglia. It's relatively easy to pick out the individual fruits from this massive fruit basket, this massive fruit bowl. It's really strange. You would tend to compare this to something like Erbabura by Zerjov, but that is much more confused. That comes across as a fruit smoothie, when this one here comes across as a fruit salad. Very easy to identify. The boozy component in here, if it's there, it might be this sort of a like artificial grape accord. It smells very much like artificial grape flavoring, like grape Kool-Aid. It has this artificial sharpness, which is just piercing through this fruity sweetness, making it so much more palatable, so much more bearable. I really like the opening of this. This is really, really amazing. It just puts me in such a good mood. It smells like candy, as I said. It brings me back to my childhood for whatever reason. It dries down to a fairly predictable, fairly overpowering, oversweet vanilla base, a little bit confused. All these beautiful fruits, which were very, very photorealistic, kind of get smoothed out, almost as if blended up. It loses a lot of character, it loses a lot of personality, but it's a really good dry down because there's no real way this could have dried down anywhere else. It's similar to Sergio Ferbapura in this case. It has a little bit of a musky component, but not overbearing. It dries down quick though. It becomes a skin scent, but a very powerful, very sweet skin scent at that. This is a fun fragrance. I really like it. The opening alone to me is a 10 out of 10. It's just so invigorating, so fresh, so fun. It just makes me want to do stuff. And although very energetic and invigorating, this is not something that I would necessarily want to wear day to day during my daytime activities. The sweet boldness of this comes across almost as a sugar rush, and it's not necessarily conducive to daytime activities. This is much more of a party animal scent. Although I do not go to parties, this comes across as a very, very beautiful, very fun summer party scent. It's just the type of stuff that you would wear for like a dance party, just like a Latin American dance party, that sort of fun vibe. Everyone is yelling, just everyone is dancing, and everyone is sweaty. This would work really, really well. And actually the heat really makes this bloom even more. It really brings out that boozy component, just really adding to the energy, adding to that fun factor. This to me really represents Lorenzo Pazzaglia's vibe, Lorenzo Pazzaglia's attitude, and why you would approach this brand as a whole. Okay, first one of my two samples is Dream Sea. This one is also incredibly good. I've been wearing the heck out of this just because it's so unique, it's so peculiar, very, very strange. Let's give it a spray and let me talk you through the scent profile. Bad sprayer, my God. Anyway, Dream Sea is a really interesting scent, as I was saying, because basically it takes the sea line DNA, which is very, very strong and very apparent in Dream Sea, but it also just kind of like mellows everything out. There's no sharpness, there's no greenery, there's no metallicness. There's a lot of that salty component, which is also flooded with this incredibly beautiful vanilla type of top. It's almost like a blanket over a very sharp sea marine scent, and it really makes it incredibly wearable. You still get a lot of the marine notes, but there's no real funk, there's no real fishiness, it's just mainly saltiness. I don't know how he engineered out the fishiness or the greenery from the cologne, but he did. This is really interesting. It's super unique. There's no other marine scent on the market which smells exactly like this. This is not gourmand, but it has this really soft, really approachable type of a sea vibe. It kind of smells like the sea in the evening for whatever reason. You're on vacation, you're on your beautiful tropical vacation at the resort. After dinner, you're just walking on the beach. Everything is engulfed in this beautiful pink purple light, which really adds a lot of romance to the vibe. The sand under your feet is still warm. The sea is just calm. This is like the most perfect ending to a beautiful vacation day. Sex Sea was all about the daytime activities. This is about the evening. This is about winding down. It's very, very relaxing. But at the same time, it still adds a little bit of edginess because of that sea aspect to it. So well controlled, so balanced. This is actually Lorenzo Pazzaglia's favorite fragrance. He also said that in an interview, and I was really curious to get myself a sample. I might even be getting a bottle later down the road just because it's so unique, it's so peculiar in a way. Too bad the atomizer on this is kind of shot. I might be transferring the remaining of this decant in a better sprayer. This to me really represents Lorenzo Pazzaglia. It perfectly combines uniqueness with mass appealingness. It's a little bit edgy, it still smells good, very, very artistic, very intuitive in a way. I really like this. I'll probably be getting a bottle soon. It's an amazing wear. I can highly, highly recommend it. If you're looking for a marine scent that is a little bit unusual, that is a little bit less edgy, that is more calm feeling, more romantic feeling, this one might be exactly what you're looking for. The last fragrance from the lot is in our decant. This one here is Py Rhum. A lot of you guys have been asking me about this. This is a very beautiful, simple-ish vanilla gourmand fragrance that really brings a lot of warmth to the wearer. Let me give it a spray so I can guide you through the scent profile. I wore this as my scent of the day a couple days ago. We got a little bit of an unexpected cold snap, and this one really brought the warmth. It really hit the spot, as they say. The vanilla in here is quite simple. It's quite direct. The boozy notes, the rum notes in here are not necessarily detectable, but they just add a little bit of sharpness to cut through the vanilla sweetness. This is a very masculine type of vanilla in my opinion. It's not overly floral, it's not overly sweet, there's no caramel notes to it. It's very simple and direct. This is a very, very potent fragrance. It easily fills rooms. It wears like a Lorenzo Pazzaglia. It wears like what you would expect a Lorenzo Pazzaglia to wear like. As I was saying, this is easily the most gourmand from the bunch just because it's so direct in its imagery. Even other stuff which is sweet, which is very fruity, stuff like sangria, those represent more of a vibe rather than an ingredient. This one here represents almost food. This is like this smells kind of like eggnog to a degree. It has a very creamy, very smooth type of feeling. It smells like a vanilla and liquor cocktail with a little bit of a peppery nuance just to give it a little bit more energy. But overall, this really sits low in the tone range. It's very, very droney, very bass heavy. It's just like a warm blanket. It's something that would cuddle you to sleep. Absolutely. This is like the perfect winter day ender. You're sitting in front of the fireplace, you have this huge fluffy blanket on top of yourself, your eyes are kind of closed just because you're half asleep, and this is so enveloping, so comforting, so relaxing. It just really, really calls you into dreaming. It's beautiful. I like this. It's so relaxing. Again, the relaxing aspect of a vanilla cocktail. It smells like a warm hug. Again, it's beautifully masculine. Well, not necessarily masculine, it's very, very unisex, but it's definitely not feminine. The sharp, boozy component of this really cut through that sweetness. The booziness comes and goes, it's not always apparent. Every now and then you get a whiff of this rum or liquor. It's really enticing, really adult. This smells adult. This is not necessarily tailored to a teenager, or it's not too youthful. It's not super elegant, but it's just like an adult gourmand, really straight to the point. And despite its lethargic, low energy type of feel, this one here also very much represents Lorenzo Pazzaglia. And it's strange because Lorenzo Pazzaglia usually injects a lot of adrenaline into his fragrances. They're all very energetic, they're all very pupil dilating. This one here comes across as a little bit slow, but it still has a lot of that Lorenzo Pazzaglia charisma. It's good, I really like it, but I'm not sure I'm gonna be getting a bottle of this just because I like more nuance, I like more complexity. This is a little bit drony to me, it's a little bit fatiguing. I would only wear this in the evening knowing that basically my sleep would just kind of like eat the bulk of the fragrance wear experience. I could probably not wear this in the day just because it would be a little bit too linear, too direct, too simple in a way. But if you're a fan of gourmands and you're looking for that elusive adult vanilla boozy fragrance, this one here might be exactly what you're looking for. Okay, we're finally at the conclusion of this video. It was incredibly fatiguing on my part. I covered 9 fragrances in relatively high detail. For some of these, I have full reviews that cover even more detail, so I would really advise you to go check out those if you want more information. The House of Lorenzo Pazzaglia overall is very, very fun, very charismatic, very unique. It smells niche. It's incredibly good value just because these 50 mLs are very, very potent. They're extract de parfum, as I said, and they last a long time. So for 145 euros, you really get a lot of wears. I would suggest you guys check out the fragrances just because they're really unique and really fun. If you're into lively, exciting fragrances, which are easy to like, easy wear, and generally mass appealing, you definitely have to keep your eyes on Lorenzo Pazzaglia. This is a brand that you definitely need to sample. Overall, what can I say? I like the brand, I like the guy, I like his presence, I like the chaotic Italianness of it. And despite me bashing some aspects of the brand, like their lack of brand identity, and the little bit confusing marketing in general, I really like the brand. I just applaud small niche brands like this that just come out of nowhere on the market and they just take everyone by storm. Yes, I'm missing some fragrances that are crucial to the brand in my opinion. I'm missing Carbonara, I'm missing Summer Hammer. Those are heavy hitters for the brand. But hey, these are the ones that entice me the most, the ones that I gravitated towards. Overall, I do feel that these really represent Lorenzo Pazzaglia. I hope that you got a better understanding of the house. I hope that I sparked your interest towards the house. Let me know if you like the format. This was, again, very, very fatiguing, but I'm happy to replicate. I'm not really sure which other brands I could do this for. Maybe it's Zoologist, maybe Meofushuni. Again, it's very fatiguing, but it's fun, it's rewarding. Let me know if you like it because this has been a lot of work. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It's always massively appreciated and it helps the channel. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's never taken for granted. If you stayed this long, extra thanks because this video is absolutely massive. Many more videos to come as per usual. See you in the next one and cheers.